Welcome back to the channel everyone, and thank you for joining me today because what we are about to talk about is one of those unbelievable coin stories that sounds like pure fantasy until you really slow down, look at the details, and understand how the rare coin market works. And today we are diving deep into the fascinating legend of the 1979 quarter dollar, a coin most people have seen, spent, or ignored without a second thought, yet according to collectors, error specialists, and long-running rumors in the numismatic world, certain extremely rare versions of this everyday quarter could be worth as much as $46 million, and before you dismiss that number as impossible, stay with me, because this story is not about one simple mistake, it is about a perfect storm of timing, minting technology, transitional metals, experimental dies, human error, undocumented test strikes, and the powerful psychology of collectors who are willing to pay staggering sums for coins that should never have existed in the first place. And it all begins in the late 1970s when the United States Mint was under enormous pressure to modernize its coinage systems, reduce costs, and adapt to a rapidly changing economy. The 1970s were turbulent years for American money. Silver had already been removed from circulating coinage, inflation was high, production demands were intense, and the mint was constantly experimenting with new alloys, new hub designs, new presses, and new quality control methods. And in 1979, the quarter dollar was still part of the familiar Washington quarter series that had been in use since 1932, but behind the scenes, subtle changes were happening that most of the public never noticed, and those changes created opportunities for extraordinary errors to slip through the system. One of the most talked about possibilities involves transitional planchet errors. During this period, the mint was testing and evaluating different metal compositions and suppliers, and while the standard quarter was supposed to be struck on a copper nickel-clad planchet, there is strong speculation that a tiny number of experimental or off-metal planchets were accidentally fed into quarter presses, resulting in quarters struck on incorrect metal cores, such as silver alloy remnants, foreign coin blanks, or experimental composite metals that were never approved for circulation. A genuine 1979 quarter struck on a wrong planchet with documented authenticity would already be worth a fortune, but the rumored $46 million examples are believed to combine multiple errors at once, including wrong metal composition, extreme weight anomalies, and unique magnetic properties that do not match any officially released U.S. coin. Another major factor is the concept of double die errors, and not the common minor doubling that collectors see on many coins, but dramatic hub doubling created during the die manufacturing process. In the late 70s, the mint was transitioning between older hubbing methods and more modern techniques, and if a working die received multiple misaligned impressions from the master hub, the resulting coin could display extreme doubling on the date, the word liberty, the motto "In God We Trust," and even Washington's profile. And while doubled die quarters do exist, the most valuable ones are those where the doubling is bold, unmistakable, and consistent across the entire design. Now imagine a 1979 quarter with such dramatic doubling combined with other rare features, such as an off-center strike that still shows a complete date and mint mark, or a broad strike that lacks a reeded edge while retaining full design detail. These kinds of combinations are what push coins into legendary territory. Another possibility that fuels the $46 million valuation is the presence of mule errors. A mule coin is created when two mismatched dies are used together, such as a quarter obverse paired with a reverse die intended for a completely different denomination or even a different country. The mint has officially acknowledged a few mule errors over the years, including famous examples involving the Sacagawea dollar and state quarter reverses, but for earlier decades, documentation is scarce, and some experts believe that undocumented mule quarters may have been struck in extremely limited numbers and quietly escaped the mint. A 1979 quarter mule featuring an experimental or foreign reverse would be a once-in-a-lifetime discovery, especially if no other examples are known, and rarity is the most powerful driver of value in numismatics. Condition is another crucial piece of the puzzle. The coins rumored to be worth $46 million are said to exist in near perfect or absolutely pristine condition, possibly struck as presentation pieces, test strikes, or coins that were never intended to circulate. A flawless surface with full mint luster, sharp strike, and no post-mint damage exponentially increases a coin's desirability, especially when paired with dramatic errors. Some collectors believe these coins may have been removed directly from the mint by employees during a time when oversight was far looser than it is today, which opens the door to another controversial topic: insider releases. Throughout history, there have been numerous cases where mint employees or contractors quietly saved unusual coins, patterns, or errors before they were destroyed, and decades later those pieces surfaced in private collections or estate sales, often shocking the numismatic community. If a small number of 1,979 quarters with extreme errors were intentionally or unintentionally preserved by insiders, it would explain why they have not been widely seen yet are still rumored to exist. Another layer of intrigue involves proof coinage. In 1979, the mint produced proof quarters at the San Francisco Mint, and proof coins are struck with specially prepared dies and polished planchets, sometimes multiple times, to achieve a mirror-like finish. Proof errors are significantly rarer than business strike errors because of the higher level of quality control, but when proof errors do occur, they are highly prized. A 1979 proof quarter struck on the wrong planchet, or with a deep cameo doubled die, or even missing a clad layer would be almost unimaginable. And if such a coin were unique, its value would be limited only by what the wealthiest collectors are willing to pay. The missing clad layer error is another fascinating possibility. Clad coins are made by bonding layers of metal together, and if one of those layers is missing or improperly bonded, the coin can appear copper-colored or unusually light. Missing clad layer errors are known, but they are rare, and the more dramatic and complete the error, the more valuable the coin becomes. Now imagine a 1979 quarter missing its outer layers entirely, revealing an exposed core with sharp design detail, combined with doubling or an off-metal composition. Such a coin would defy expectations and become a centerpiece of any elite collection. Alignment errors also play a role in this story. Coin dies must be precisely aligned, and when they are not, you can get rotated die errors where the reverse is turned at an unusual angle relative to the obverse, while minor rotations are fairly common. Extreme rotations approaching 180 degrees are much rarer and more valuable, and again, value skyrockets when multiple errors coexist on a single coin. The psychology of the rare coin market cannot be ignored either. Collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying stories, mysteries, and status. Owning a coin that is rumored to be the most valuable quarter in existence carries immense prestige. Museums, billionaires, and private collectors compete fiercely for such pieces, and when two or more wealthy individuals decide they must own the same unique coin, price becomes almost irrelevant. Auctions can spiral into the tens of millions, especially when the coin is backed by third-party grading, metallurgical analysis, and expert consensus that it is genuine and unprecedented. Grading services play a critical role here. A coin rumored to be worth $46 million would need to be authenticated by top-tier grading companies, encapsulated, and studied extensively. Advanced technologies like X-ray fluorescence, electron microscopy, and density testing can reveal whether a coin's metal composition matches known standards or represents something entirely new. If testing reveals an unknown or experimental alloy used only briefly at the mint, the coin's historical significance alone could justify astronomical valuations. There is also speculation about prototype designs. While the Washington quarter design officially remained unchanged in 1979, internal experiments with relief. Next. 190 quarter dollar. Today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating and controversial modern coin stories ever discussed, the 1990 quarter dollar, a coin that at first glance looks like nothing more than a normal Washington quarter you might still find in circulation. but according to collectors, error hunters, and long-running numismatic rumors, specific rare examples of this coin have been linked to a staggering estimated value of up to $29 million, and that shocking number isn't attached to gold content or ancient history. It's tied to mistakes, minting errors, and strange possibilities that turn a common coin into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. So sit back, stay with me, and let's explore how a simple 1990 D quarter could theoretically reach a value that rivals mansions, supercars, and even lottery jackpots, because the story of this coin is not just about metal, it's about human error, industrial processes, collector psychology, and the incredible way rarity is sometimes born entirely by accident, starting with the fact that the 1990 D quarter was struck at the Denver Mint during a period when the U.S. Mint was producing massive quantities of circulating coinage to meet everyday demand, meaning speed, volume, and efficiency were prioritized over microscopic perfection, and while most coins came out exactly as intended, history shows that when millions upon millions of coins are produced, mistakes are not just possible, they are inevitable, and those mistakes, when severe, unusual, or unique, can become the foundation for enormous value, especially when they escape into circulation unnoticed. And one of the most discussed possibilities surrounding the 1990 D quarter involves major mint errors such as off-metal strikes, where the coin is struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination or even a foreign coin, creating a quarter that has the wrong weight, composition, thickness, and sometimes even color. And if a genuine 1990 D quarter were confirmed to be struck on a silver planchet, a wrong alloy, or an experimental metal never meant for public release, the rarity of such a piece could push it into legendary territory, especially if documentation or metallurgical testing confirmed it as a unique or near-unique survivor, because collectors don't just pay for metal, they pay for stories that can never be repeated. And another powerful driver of the $29 million valuation claim comes from extreme die errors, including dramatic double strikes, multiple strikes off-center, or blockage errors where one coin impresses its image onto another, resulting in mirrored or distorted designs that are visually shocking and instantly recognizable. And while minor doubling is common and often worthless, a truly dramatic double die where the lettering, date, and portrait show clear separation visible to the naked eye could elevate a coin into elite status, especially if it were the only known example from the Denver Mint for that year. And then there are mule errors, among the rarest and most valuable mint mistakes of all, where mismatched dies are used together, such as a quarter obverse paired with a reverse design from an entirely different denomination or year. And while mule errors are extraordinarily rare, they have happened before, and when they do, they rewrite price guides overnight, because they represent a failure in the minting process so extreme that it challenges our assumptions about quality control. And if a 1990 D quarter mule were discovered pairing the Washington obverse with an incompatible reverse, it would instantly become one of the most talked about coins in American numismatics, potentially justifying valuations that sound unbelievable to the average person, especially when wealthy collectors compete fiercely for ownership of a piece that may never surface again. And beyond striking errors, planchet errors also play a huge role in the mythology of the 1990 D quarter, including clipped planchets where chunks of metal are missing due to misfed sheets, improperly alloyed blanks that change the coin's appearance and weight, and lamination errors where layers of metal peel away, revealing the chaotic nature of mass production. And while many planchet errors are modestly priced, the most dramatic and unusual examples, especially when combined with other errors like off-center strikes or doubled dies, can escalate into ultra-high value territory, because collectors value complexity, rarity, and visual impact, and the more unlikely the combination of errors, the fewer comparable pieces exist, making valuation almost impossible using traditional methods, which opens the door to speculation, private sales, and whispered eight-figure figures. And one of the most intriguing possibilities often mentioned in discussions of ultra-valuable modern quarters is the accidental use of experimental or transitional planchets, especially During years when the mint was testing new metal compositions or adjusting production processes, because if even a handful of test blanks were accidentally struck with regular dies and released, those coins would represent a hidden chapter of mint history, and if documentation or expert consensus confirmed such an origin for a 1990 D quarter, the resulting value would be driven not by face value or even silver content, but by the fact that the coin was never supposed to exist, making it a numismatic anomaly, and anomalies are where record-breaking prices are born, and condition also plays an enormous role in pushing a coin toward extreme valuations, because a major error coin that survives in pristine, uncirculated, or proof-like condition is exponentially rarer than one that shows wear, scratches, or environmental damage, and when a flawless surface meets a spectacular error, the result can be a coin that seems almost unreal, as if it slipped through time untouched, and collectors with deep pockets are willing to pay astonishing sums for that combination, especially when third-party grading services authenticate and encapsulate the coin, providing confidence and legitimacy that fuels competitive bidding, and the Denver Mint mark itself adds another layer of intrigue, because while Philadelphia produced enormous quantities of quarters, Denver minted errors sometimes appear in lower numbers, and scarcity tied to a specific mint can amplify demand, especially among collectors who specialize in mint mark sets or error coins from particular facilities, and when rumors circulate that a specific Denver minted quarter has surfaced with a never-before-seen error, the numismatic community takes notice quickly, and prices can escalate rapidly as speculation spreads. And the idea of a $29 million valuation also reflects how private treaty sales and behind-the-scenes negotiations differ from public auction results, because not every legendary coin appears in a televised auction. Some change hands quietly between elite collectors, investors, or institutions, with confidentiality agreements that prevent exact figures from becoming public, which allows rumors, estimates, and reported values to grow over time, especially when those involved hint at record-breaking numbers without confirming details. And this phenomenon has happened before with other coins that were once dismissed as myths until documentation eventually surfaced, and another factor fueling the mystique of the 1990 D quarter is the ongoing search itself, because millions of these coins were released into circulation, meaning that the possibility, however slim, still exists that an undiscovered error could be sitting in a jar, drawer, or inherited collection, and that sense of possibility keeps collectors engaged, hopeful, and willing to invest time and money into searching rolls, attending shows, and studying minute details under magnification, because the idea that a life-changing discovery could still be out there is powerful, and that power translates into perceived value, and even skepticism plays a role, because debates about whether a coin is truly worth tens of millions keep it in the spotlight, and as long as a story is discussed, analyzed, and argued over, it maintains relevance, which in turn maintains demand. And demand is ultimately what determines price in the collector market, not face value, not metal content, but how many people want something and how far they are willing to go to own it. And when it comes to ultra-rare error coins, that willingness can reach astonishing heights, especially among collectors who already own everything else and are searching for the next impossible piece, and the 1990 D quarter. Next. 1995 P quarter dollar today, because what we are about to explore is one of those unbelievable stories that turns ordinary pocket change into a jaw-dropping legend, a story that makes people check their drawers, their jars, and even the coins buried deep in old wallets, because today we are diving into the mysterious and fascinating tale of the 1995 P quarter dollar coin. A coin that on the surface looks completely normal, something you might have spent on a soda or a parking meter without a second thought, yet according to collectors, researchers, and coin enthusiasts, certain rare examples of this very coin have been rumored to reach an astonishing value of up to $17 million due to a perfect storm of minting errors, production mistakes, unusual circumstances, and extreme collector demand. And as always here on the channel, our goal is to take you on a journey Not just to tell you that something is valuable, but to explain why, how, and what possibilities could turn a simple 25-cent piece into a life-changing treasure. So sit back, relax, and let's unravel this story together from the very beginning, because understanding the context of the 1995 p quarter is just as important as understanding the errors themselves, and to do that we need to go back to the mid-1990s, a time when the United States Mint was operating at massive scale, producing billions of coins each year to keep up with everyday commerce, and the Philadelphia Mint, indicated by the P Mint mark on the obverse of the coin, was one of the busiest facilities in the country, striking enormous quantities of quarters that would circulate widely across the nation, and the standard 1995 p quarter was part of the Washington Quarter series, featuring George Washington on the front and the familiar eagle reverse design that had been in use for decades before the state quarters program began in 1999, meaning these coins were produced using traditional methods, traditional dies, and traditional quality control systems that, while advanced for their time, were not perfect, and it is within this environment of high-speed production, worn dies, human oversight, mechanical stress, and material inconsistencies that extraordinary errors can and do occur, and it is these errors that form the foundation of the $17 million valuation narrative. Because in the world of numismatics, rarity is king, but rarity alone is not enough. A coin must also have a compelling story, a visually striking anomaly, and a level of mystery that keeps collectors talking, speculating, and competing, and the 1995 p quarter checks all of those boxes when the right combination of mistakes appears on a single coin. One of the most talked about and dramatic possibilities being the presence of a multi-layered minting error involving off-metal strikes, planchet anomalies, and die misalignment all occurring together, because imagine for a moment a quarter that was never supposed to exist, struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination or even a foreign coin, resulting in incorrect weight, incorrect thickness, and an unusual sound when dropped on a table, something experienced collectors immediately notice. And now imagine that same planchet passing through the presses while the dies themselves were misaligned, creating a dramatic off-center strike where parts of the design are missing while other areas appear doubled or stretched, and then add to that the possibility of a rotated die error where the reverse is not properly aligned with the obverse, creating a coin that looks twisted in orientation, and suddenly you are no longer looking at a simple error, you are looking at a once-in-a-generation anomaly that challenges everything we expect from a mass-produced coin. And this is where the value begins to skyrocket, because while single errors are collectible, multiple major errors on the same coin are exponentially rarer, and when such a coin can be authenticated, graded, and traced back to a specific mint and year, it becomes the kind of piece that elite collectors and museums compete for. And another layer of intrigue surrounding the 1995 p quarter involves the possibility of double die errors, which occur when the die used to strike the coin receives multiple misaligned impressions during its creation, leading to visible doubling in the lettering, numbers, and design elements. And while minor doubling is fairly common and often dismissed, dramatic double die varieties with strong separation lines are exceptionally rare, and when they appear on high-circulation coins like quarters, they generate enormous excitement, because they represent a fundamental breakdown in the die creation process itself, and collectors scrutinizing 1995 p quarters have reported examples with extreme doubling on the date, the word liberty, and even Washington's profile, suggesting that a small number of dies may have escaped quality control before being retired. And when you combine that with the sheer volume of coins produced in 1995, the odds of finding one of these dramatic doubled dies become vanishingly small, which in turn fuels the perception of immense value. And then there is the possibility of a wrong planchet error involving experimental or transitional metals, because the United States Mint has a long history of testing different metal compositions, and occasionally these test planchets accidentally enter the production stream, resulting in coins struck on materials that were never intended for public release, and a 1995 p quarter struck on such a planchet would exhibit unusual coloration, magnetism, and weight, characteristics that immediately set it apart from standard copper nickel-clad quarters, and if such a coin were discovered and verified, it would represent not just an error but a glimpse into a hidden chapter of mint experimentation, something collectors prize immensely, and the rumored $17 million valuation often hinges on the idea that a unique example exists that combines a wrong planchet strike with severe die errors and pristine condition, because condition is another critical factor in the valuation equation, as coins that survive with minimal wear, sharp details, and original surfaces are exponentially more valuable than those that show signs of circulation. And if a 1995 P quarter with these extreme errors somehow remained uncirculated, perhaps pulled from a mint bag or saved unknowingly by a collector decades ago, its value would increase dramatically. And beyond physical errors, there is also the concept of provenance, the documented history of a coin's ownership and discovery, because a coin that can be traced back to a specific moment, such as being discovered in a sealed mint roll or an estate with ties to mint employees, carries an added layer of credibility and intrigue, and stories have circulated within numismatic circles about unusual 1995 P quarters found in unexpected places, sometimes accompanied by other anomalous coins from the same period, suggesting the possibility of a brief window during which quality control was compromised. And while not all of these stories can be independently verified, they contribute to the mystique and legend surrounding the coin. And it is important to understand that the $17 million figure is not a random number but a speculative valuation based on comparisons to other ultra-rare coins that have sold for similar amounts, such as unique error coins, one-of-a-kind mint mistakes, and historically significant pieces that exist in only a single known example, and collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums for such coins not just because of their rarity but because they represent the pinnacle of the hobby, the ultimate conversation piece, the crown jewel of a collection. And the 1995 P quarter, when imagined in its most extreme error configuration, fits that mold perfectly. Last. Today, this is the place where ordinary-looking pocket change turns into extraordinary stories of mystery, rarity, and life-changing value, and today we are diving deep into a coin that most people have held without ever giving it a second thought, the 1985 D quarter dollar, a coin that on the surface appears completely ordinary, but beneath that familiar Washington design lies a world of minting mistakes, rare errors, fascinating production quirks, and collector-driven possibilities that have fueled rumors, speculation, and serious numismatic interest, suggesting that under the right circumstances this humble coin could command values reaching as high as $7 million. And as we explore this story together, imagine yourself checking old jars, inherited collections, or even loose change, because history has shown time and again that the most valuable coins often hide in plain sight, and the 1985 D quarter is a perfect example of how a single year, a single mint, and a series of extraordinary errors can transform a 25-cent piece into a potential fortune. So let's take a journey back to the mid-1980s when the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, producing hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demands of a growing economy, vending machines, parking meters, and everyday commerce. And during this high-speed production environment, mistakes were not just possible, they were inevitable. And it is within these mistakes that the legend of the 1985 D quarter begins to take shape, because while most 1985 D quarters are worth only face value or a modest premium in uncirculated condition, a very small number are believed to exhibit extreme mint errors that elevate them into a completely different category of rarity and desirability, errors that include dramatic double dies, off-metal strikes, wrong planchet errors, severe die breaks, missing clad layers, improper alloy mixtures, misaligned dies, rotated dies, struck through debris, and even transitional errors related to planchet preparation and die installation, all of which become exponentially more valuable when combined in a single specimen or preserved in exceptionally high mint state condition. And to truly understand why collectors are willing to assign such staggering values to coins like the 1985 D quarter, we need to understand how quarters were made during this era, because the quarter dollar in 1985 was composed of a copper core sandwiched between two layers of copper-nickel, and this clad composition required precise bonding, rolling, cutting, annealing, washing, and striking processes, each step presenting an opportunity for something to go wrong, and when something did go wrong in a spectacular way, the resulting coin could become a once-in-a-lifetime rarity, especially if it escaped quality control and entered circulation unnoticed, which is exactly how many of the most valuable error coins in history were born, and the Denver Mint in 1985 was producing quarters at a rate that made microscopic inspection of every planchet and every die impossible, meaning that rare anomalies could and did slip through, and one of the most talked about error types associated with the 1985 D quarter is the double die error, where elements of the design such as the lettering, date, or Washington's profile appear doubled due to a misalignment during the die creation process, and while minor doubling is relatively common and often dismissed as machine doubling, true double die errors are the result of hubbing mistakes and can show strong, rounded, and clearly separated doubling that collectors crave, and if a 1985 D quarter were discovered with dramatic doubled lettering on the obverse or reverse, especially on key inscriptions like Liberty or I in God We Trust, combined with sharp strike quality and minimal wear, its value would instantly soar into the tens or hundreds of thousands, and when combined with additional errors or unique circumstances, values could climb even higher, especially if the coin were authenticated by major grading services and recognized as a unique or extremely rare variety. And then there are off-metal errors, which are among the most exciting and valuable mistakes the mint can make, because they involve striking a coin on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a different country, and if a 1985 D quarter were struck on a planchet meant for a nickel, a foreign coin, or a test alloy, the resulting weight, thickness, and appearance would be dramatically different, making it immediately obvious to collectors that something extraordinary had occurred, and such off-metal quarters are already known to sell for tens of thousands of dollars, but a previously unknown or unique off-metal strike from 1985 D, especially one struck on a rare experimental or wrong-year planchet, could potentially reach seven figures, particularly if it were the only known example, because uniqueness in numismatics is one of the most powerful drivers of value, and another highly prized error category is missing clad layer errors, where one or both of the outer copper-nickel layers fail to bond properly to the copper core, resulting in a coin that appears copper on one side or both sides. And while missing clad layer quarters exist from several years, they are still relatively rare, and examples from 1985 D with complete and clean missing layers, sharp detail, and no post-mint damage can command substantial premiums, and when combined with other errors such as die rotation or misalignment, their desirability increases dramatically. And speaking of die rotation, a rotated die error occurs when the obverse and reverse dies are not aligned properly, causing the reverse design to appear rotated relative to the obverse, and while minor rotations are fairly common, extreme rotations of 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or unusual angles are much rarer and more valuable, and a severely rotated 1985 D quarter in mint state condition would be a major find, especially if accompanied by other striking anomalies. And then there are broad strike errors, where the coin is struck without the retaining collar, allowing the metal to spread outward, resulting in a wider, thinner coin with distorted lettering, and broad strikes can be visually dramatic and highly collectible, and a broad-struck 1985 D quarter with strong detail and no damage could fetch impressive sums, especially if it were part of a small or unknown group of similar errors. And we also need to consider die break and cut errors, which occur when a die develops cracks or breaks during use, leaving raised, blob-like areas on the struck coin. And while small die cracks are common, large cuts that significantly alter the design are far rarer and much more valuable, and a massive cut on a 1985 D quarter that obscures part of the design or creates a unique appearance could be worth tens of thousands on its own. And again, when combined with other errors or exceptional preservation, the value climbs, and one of the most intriguing possibilities in the story of the $7 million 1985 D-quarter is the concept of compound errors, which are coins that exhibit more than one major error simultaneously, such as a double die-off metal broadstrike with a missing clad layer. And while such combinations are extraordinarily rare, they are not impossible, and history has shown that when multiple major errors occur together, the resulting coin can become legendary, with collectors and institutions competing fiercely to acquire it, driving prices into the millions. And beyond physical errors, there is also the matter of condition, because a coin's state of preservation plays a massive role in its value, and a 1985 D-quarter graded in the highest mint state levels with full luster, sharp strike, and no marks is already scarce, and if such a coin also possessed a significant error, its value would multiply dramatically, because high-grade error coins are far rarer than circulated ones, as errors often draw attention and are removed from circulation quickly, making pristine examples exceptionally hard to find. And then there is the role of collector psychology and market dynamics, because value is not determined by rarity alone, but by demand, story, and perceived importance. And the idea that a common modern quarter could be worth millions captures the imagination of collectors and the public alike, fueling interest, searches, and speculation.